I open this special meeting of the Council of Deans from the Christian origins of VU Amsterdam to the polychromatic academic community that we are today. Our scientific practice is intertwined with fundamental values and a sense of wonder. Please be seated. Some last visitors are helping. Yeah. Well, dear friends, on behalf of the Executive Board, I welcome you to the 143rd birthday of our beautiful university, the Dies Natalis. I would like to extend a special welcome to Professor Toby Kiers. Toby, where are you? There you are. Our DS speaker of today. And to our honorary Dr.to-be, Professor Tima Bansal. To our new president, Margrethe Jongman, a special welcome from Marcel and me. To the members of the supervisory board, to the deans and directors, I can't see you, but you must be there, of VU Amsterdam, the board of the VU-vereniging, members of the Works Council and the University Student Council, student bodies, staff, VU Advisory Council, and of course to our stage guests today. I also welcome our societal partners who I saw in large numbers, friends and everyone else in this room. Thank you very much for giving our DS such a colorful presence today. Today I will invite you to reflect with me on what I think is an increasingly important concept for our university, the network. Networks are part of every aspect of our lives, from the digital connections that bind us to the complex systems of nature. At VU Amsterdam, we are surrounded by a multitude of networks, from academic collaborations to the social fabrics that unite us as a community. Community. That subject is, of course, not arbitrary. More than ever, our network, our community, counts. While also, more than ever, our network, our community, is at stake. I will say a few more words about this at the end of this meeting. When you leave this room, I hope you will have a few new ideas and a new understanding and appreciation for the networks that connect us. The networks that we are part of. The networks that shape our future. Let's dream aloud together for a moment and see what benefits do these networks bring and what is at stake in this web of relationships and ideas that we call a university. There's a lot to see and to hear today. Professor Toby Kiers will deliver the DS speech, and we will experience a dance performance, and I'm emphasizing the word experience. We will present an honorary doctorate to Professor Tima Bansal. We will discuss the Network University. We will listen to a column by our new writer-in-residence, Nina Polak, and with so much to enjoy, let's get started immediately with our first guest. We now have the pleasure of welcoming a leading thinker and a researcher from our university, whose work has literally and figuratively broken new ground. And you will learn what I mean by that in a minute. Spinozaprijswinnaar Toby Kiers will take us on a journey through the wonderful world of underground networks, a realm that stretches beneath our feet but is crucial for life on Earth. I'm very proud to present to you Professor Toby Kiers.
Hi everyone, it's really nice up here. It's such an honor to be part of today and to share what we've been discovering under our feet with such an audience that sort of feels like family. So I want to start with a quote today. We have to remember that what we observe is not nature herself. I like that, herself. But nature exposed to our method of questioning. So that's what's good about being an academic, is that we all have different ways of probing the world. And what excites me most is the ability to take all of those different perspectives to focus on one particular kingdom of organisms. Fungi. So fungi are sort of like the most alien-like organisms on Earth. They're more closely related to humans, but they look kind of like plants. And they weren't even made their own kingdom until about the 1960s. And what you're looking at right now is a network of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and these are the soil fungi that live below our feet. And what we've been seeing in the last 2 years is mind-blowing. So this is a video of the nutrient streams inside the fungi themselves. And this is in real time. This is not sped up. You can see the timestamp in the corner. And what you see are complex flows of nutrients. Things like carbon that are being fed from the plant communities down to the fungi, and phosphorus and nitrogen that the fungi themselves collect. Now these fungi, they're open tube systems, and so we can study them as connected networks between plants and actually try to understand the strategies by which the fungi move these flows. Now, to understand the symbiosis, you have to realize that all plants, about 70 to 90% of plant species on Earth, are colonized by these fungal networks. And how the symbiosis works is that the plants feed carbon, they photosynthesize, they're taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, they're turning it into sugars and fats that they feed down to the fungal network. And in exchange, the fungal network, it forages in the soil for things like phosphorus and nitrogen, and they engage in a very sophisticated trade. And that's what we study at my lab here, is trying to understand those sophisticated dynamics. Now, as a result of this symbiosis, about 30 to 50%, just stop and think about that for a second. 30 to 50% of the living biomass of soils is made up of these networks. So they're vast, they're huge, and they're incredibly important. And they're particularly important in drawing carbon below ground. They sort of act as a vacuum to draw carbon below ground. This video isn't starting, but what you would see is, if it was going, is a little hump that would be tropical forests. And that's where we think of the greatest carbon stores on Earth, right? But if you look below ground in places like the tundra underground, we have even more carbon. 75% of all carbon, terrestrial carbon, is stored underground in soils. And because of this tiny little evolutionary innovation between mycorrhizal fungi and plants, some 450 million years ago, it led to a 90% reduction in CO2 levels. So just one tiny evolutionary innovation that allowed plants to leave their aquatic environment and move on to land and partner with fungi that started to digest rocks and actually feed it to the plants in exchange for carbon. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but actually, fungi are the ancestral state of plants. So plants lived for some 50 million years with no root systems. Instead, they just relied on fungi for all of their nutrients. And so root systems are actually kind of a new evolutionary innovation in the world. Now, because plants rely on fungi so much, they have to feed them lots of carbon. And so that's what we've been doing in my lab, is trying to harmonize and understand all of the data that has been published, where people actually labeled CO2 and saw how much of that was going down into fungal networks. And we published a paper recently that it looks like about 13 billion tons of CO2 every year are fed from plants to these mycorrhizal networks. And to give you a sense of that enormity, that's about a third of all global emissions from fossil fuels are moving through these networks. And so, of course, when research like this comes out, there's really exciting titles like "Vast Networks Hold the Key to the Climate Fight." And as scientists, we're like, whoa, slow down, there's a lot to understand. But we do know that there's such an important entry point for carbon into the soil. But then what happens? I get goosebumps thinking, what happens once that carbon is in these networks? How do the fungi themselves control carbon flows? Now again, just to stress this one more time in case you didn't realize just how important these networks are, there's one estimate that the length of these fungi in the top 10 centimeters of soils is about 450 quadrillion kilometers, so half the length of our galaxy. And there's carbon flowing through them. So we have to understand what the fungi are doing with those resources. Now, even if it didn't matter for the climate, these organisms are some of the most interesting organisms on Earth, because what they do is they evolve clever ways of moving the resources in ways that benefit themselves. So think about what a network has to do, a symbiotic network, in this case, the fungi. The first thing it has to do is actually create a physical infrastructure that colonizes the soil. And it can connect multiple plants simultaneously. And it creates this infrastructure, but then it has to evaluate where to move those resources. So you have to remember, the fungi, they're collecting phosphorus, nitrogen, and they're moving it to these plant root systems in exchange for carbon. So how do they evaluate where to transport it? Then, of course, they have to collect the payoffs for those fungi, because that's how they live. These fungi, the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, are what we call obligate biotrophs, which means they are completely dependent on host carbon for all of their carbon. They don't break it down from decomposing litter. They need to be fed it directly from these tree roots. So they have to get a good deal. They have to be able to use those resources to get the best deal they can. And so over the time that I've been at the FU, we've been studying this in a very precise manner, trying to understand just how they move resources to get carbon. And we have found that these fungi have evolved some of the most sophisticated trade strategies on Earth. They can discriminate among a plant that's grown in the sun versus the shade. We know that the plants, if they receive phosphorus, that actually triggers cooperation and allows for more carbon to be sent to the network. The fungi themselves, they can even restrict the plant's own autonomy by closing down their ability to take up nutrients directly, which creates sort of an addiction of the plant on the fungi themselves. They move resources where they can get better payoffs. They hoard the resources in their networks so the plants have no access to it, and then give it to them later for a higher price. And so to understand all of these different strategies, we need to understand, what is it like to be a mycorrhizal fungi? What is it like to be you? Literally, that's one of the most important questions that we can ask as scientists, to just take a pause. What is it like to be you? Because these fungi, they're literally bathed in sensory information, right? Soils are among the most complex ecosystems on Earth. Right? 59% of all species live below ground. They're incredibly biodiverse, complex environments. So how do the fungi make decisions? How do they decide where to move resources? They have to somehow integrate these very complex streams of data, and that's what we're trying to figure out. And so together with the AMOF, which is the Biophysics Institute here in Amsterdam, and Tom Shimizu, we've built an imaging robot that actually allows us to understand how these networks forage across space. And what we do is we take scans of networks across time every 2 hours, and we actually extract the graph network and understand how they move. So to give you an example, working with a very talented PhD student, Coco Bissot, he's able to extract these graphs and then follow every single node of this network across time and space. So that means that in one single plate, we can have about 10,000 different nodes, but we can make these experiments where we're tracking about 500,000 nodes simultaneously. So this is leading to hundreds of terabytes of data in terms of trying to understand how networks are formed. And most interestingly for us, how they change under climate extremes. What happens if we change the temperature? What happens if we change the diversity of plants? What happens if we have higher diversity of fungal strains in a single plate? We can create all of these situations and then understand how the network itself, the topology, the architecture of the network changes. And now what we're doing, and thanks to this Spinoza Award, is we're building a second imaging robot that now allows us to not only understand the topology of the network, but at every single junction in that network, we can actually start taking these very high-resolution videos of carbon flows. So that's what you're looking at right now, as again, in real time, the flow of carbon inside these networks. We're able to tag the carbon with a probe and watch where it goes, and watch how the fungi are actually moving this carbon across space. Now, what's interesting is that this is one of my favorite videos. It's a video made by Rachel Cargill, who's a current PhD student right now, is you see this carbon moving up the network, and it comes to this one junction. And again, this is in real time, and it splits off to the right. It's like this liquid cargo, right? The biophysicists can't believe this liquid cargo. And then it comes back down to the junction, and it splits perfectly in half. And so trying to understand these patterns, of course, we're like, we'll study it in every little detail to see how it does that. And again, it just raises more questions than we're able to answer. But that's why we're moving across disciplines. Again, already we've talked about economics, we're talking about biophysics, right? There's a lot of theory, game theory, that goes into trying to understand and predict these types of resources. So that's what we're interested in doing over the next couple years, is actually trying to create tools to decode flows as almost like behavioral dialects, to try to understand what is it then, how do they calculate, how do they process information? Because these living sensing networks, they're everywhere, and we want to understand how they do it. And of course, it has really exciting applied issues as well, because we can really understand the carbon flows, how they're going below ground. What makes it so you can have denser, deeper networks? What makes the carbon go faster? Okay, why does it matter? This is, yeah, I hope it already matters. It's just science. Science matters. It's amazing. But it also matters because they're disappearing. And this is the scary but also hopeful part of the speech, is like, there's still time, but not that much time. Soils are in trouble. And all of that evolutionary innovation, all of those different strains that have been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, they're threatened. And that scares us. And so as a scientist, we've been talking about these issues for so long, but it wasn't getting out to the public. And so about 2 years ago, we started a nonprofit it's called SPUN. And SPUN stands for the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks. And it's a group that is advocating for the protection and mapping of the biodiversity of these networks across the entire Earth. And so that's what we're doing. We're working with local scientists across the world to begin to map these biodiversity patterns and really build the first high-resolution global maps of mycorrhizal biodiversity. So we work with scientists using all kinds of machine learning algorithms to actually make predictions about where these biodiversity hotspots are. So here shown in yellow, in a recent trip that we went to in Chile. But I think the thing that the most excites me about this work is working with this amazing group of scientists across the world. So through this nonprofit, we've given away about $500,000 already for scientists around the world to start mapping the networks in their own ecosystems. And this slide makes me incredibly proud, because these are all scientists that are using the same protocol to actually understand the ecosystems in their home soils. And the projects are just absolutely incredible. Places in Guatemala, in Panama, some wonderful scientists in Kenya and India and Argentina. I mean, the list goes on. Pakistan, Armenia, all of these scientists, they're excited about actually trying to understand what's happening below their feet. And from that, we're able to make these really high-resolution maps that not only tell us about the biodiversity patterns of these fungi, but other things that ecosystem parameters, like how much carbon is in an ecosystem, that we care about. So that's what you're looking at right now of Europe, is looking at the fungal biodiversity metric times soil carbon. So these are places that host really high fungal biodiversity and really high soil carbon. So we can go to those places and actually try to understand the gene function of how these communities keep carbon in the ground. Because that's really what this is focused on, is that if we can map and understand these communities, then we can start to protect them. And so organizations are getting very interested in the work we're doing. We recently went with the Nature Conservancy to Palmyra Atoll, which is the most remote ecosystem on Earth. It's in the middle of the Pacific. You can't go anywhere more remote. It's 44% sharks. Like the biomass is so we're hiking across between these islands and actually getting bumped by sharks. I've never done that before. And this is a video from Lesotho, in the highlands of Lesotho. So that's that small country in the middle of South Africa, where they have these wetlands that have extraordinarily high amounts of carbon, but face really intense degradation from animals. And so we're trying to get to these ecosystems and work with scientists there to understand what biodiversity is there, how we can protect it. This is a video from Kazakhstan, where one of my PhD students went, where desertification is happening really fast, right? These are old growth, we use that term, old growth forest. We talk about old growth grasslands. You know, these are grasslands that have been there for so long, but now really face a lot of desertification. And we're also using incredibly new techniques. So one of the things that we just came back from was a trip to Corsica, where we're doing soil metatranscriptomics. This is amazing. We had to hike dry ice into the field with us, because we go and we actually take soil cores and get the fungal genes and put them on ice so we can freeze them and actually look at the RNA. So not only see who is there, but what they're doing at this exact time. So we got to sample under some of the oldest trees in the Mediterranean. So this one chestnut that was about 1,200 years old. I mean, some of these trees are absolutely magnificent. I'm just coming to the end. I'm just trying to get everybody excited. I hope it worked. What we want to do, and here's some articles about our work, is like really energize the global community to start caring about networks and to start caring about the underground ecosystems that house these networks. There has been such a bias in climate agendas and in conservation agendas focused on above-ground ecosystems. But below those ecosystems is a huge amount of biodiversity that really supports everything above ground. So if we can just focus on that, I think we will have a lot of luck. So this is an amazing picture. This is arbuscular mycorrhizal. Who wouldn't want to study this? With multiple nuclei inside a spore. This is a photo taken from an assistant professor here at the VU. So come visit us. We're part of A-Life. If people are interested in what we're doing, it would be great to have some visitors. And for my last slide, which isn't going to play, but if it did play, it's this: you go down layers and layers and layers into what looks like what is a network, to actually just see how beautiful and complex they are. Thank you so much.
So this is exactly the type of high-quality research that we have here at the VU. Toby, thank you so much. I remember when you got the Spinoza Prize. I'll just lower this thing a little bit so I can see you. When you got the Spinoza Prize, you were on stage, and everybody was looking at you, and all the lights were shining on you, of course. But you were constantly watching your team, who were sitting in one of the top rows and were cheering on. And I think that is exactly why we think you're such an interesting scientist and also such an interesting person. Just, you know, caring for your people, working with so many people together. Having to look at underground networks means that you have to build an above ground network as well, and you do that so beautifully. So thank you so much for these insights and these beautiful images. Yeah, that certainly warrants an extra applause. Thanks again. So this recognition in the sense of a Spinoza Prize and many other prizes that you've got brings up interesting questions about how we should think about a university. Could the underground network, this is a question that I want to ask you in the audience, could the underground network of Toby also be a good metaphor for our academic community? Can we be such a network, working together, sharing resources, etc.? This question is at the core of our new VU research strategy. It will encourage us to think outside of the usual academic boundaries and also outside of the traditional disciplines and other organized hierarchies, if you will. Our new research strategy highlights the importance of collaborating across different fields and recognizing diverse talents, especially around societal issues, of course. And this asks for a network that is dynamic and a network that is responsive to whatever happens in the outer world. The next example that we're going to see illustrates that the network of our academic community even moves beyond the walls of our university. It moves to art. You're about to be part of a dance performance led by Avalon Brown, a teacher of Afro-mixed dance at our own Gifjoen Center of Art. The performance is not just an artistic expression, but it's also a vivid embodiment of the themes that we are discussing today. So I would like to invite to the stage Avalon Brown and the Afro-mix dance. Where are you? Are you hiding? Ah, there they are. Thank you.
I used to look at the stars and wonder. I felt the sun through rain and thunder, roaming amongst colorful fields, free and wild, carrying the unknown wisdom of a child. The spirit of science runs through my veins. Yet, that playful curiosity is hard to maintain. Where I was outward, now I've turned inward. Equations, experiments, artificial machines, lost in scientific papers on computer screens. Delusions of self-importance left me depleted, defeated. Trapped in buildings made of concrete, feeling incomplete. Outside these walls, nature calls. I listen to her heartbeat. I follow her rhythm on bare feet. Grounded, I feel her energy. Below me, through me, surrounding me. It sets me free. In nature, all is connected. From the birth of a star to the death of a dragonfly. From the life-giving rain to the complicated human brain. And so now I reconnect with you, with Earth, with all that I was and all that I am. And like the fungi in the soil beneath me, I regain my curiosity and wonder.
Masalaya, oya masalaya makel, oya malokai omale, omalaya mokali alasu, salame, salame alo, salame alo, salam alekalo yola.
Wow, that was amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Avalon Brown and his Afromix team. I really wanted to participate, but that would have really ruined the show, I must say. And a few people were holding me back, so it was no chance. Anyway, what is interesting to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that these were alumni of our university. So even when you graduate, we don't let you go. You're still part of the network. So that is an extra special treat. We will now prepare for a more ceremonial part of the program. We are about to award an honorary doctorate, and that's a very special treat. I ask the Beadle to lead onto the stage the following persons. Arjen van Witteloostuin, Dean of the School of Business and Economics, honorary promoters Mirella Kleine and Hans Berens. Hans Berens is Professor of Innovation and Organization, and Mirella is Professor of Customer Experience Management, and of course, Tima Bansal, who is going to receive the honorary doctorate. Please come onto the stage. So when you ever want to see this dance again, or a movie, or you know what, there's so much culture on campus, just go there, it's perfect. Anyway, now we're going to go back to the official part. All right. In the year of the 75th anniversary of the School of Business and Economics of VU Amsterdam, we are pleased to offer you, Tima Bansal, an honorary doctorate for the global progress that scholarship and practice have made through your work on business sustainability and your contributions to enhance impactful scholarship. The honorary doctorate is a testament of the great respect that is shared by all members of the Council of Deans that we hold for your work. Professor Bansal, your recent contributions have been a tremendous source of inspiration to all of us, and it brings us great pride to confer upon you this honorary doctorate from our beautiful university. The promotion will now be performed by Professor Hans Berens and Professor Mirella Kleine, who have been designated as the honorary promoters by the College of Deans. And I will ask the deans to please stand up. Hans and Mirella, please go ahead.
By the power vested by the statute of the Vrije Universiteit, I hereby confer upon you, Tima Bansal, the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa and declare you in possession of all the rights and given to you by law or custom associated with this title. As proof of this, I'm going to hand you the diploma signed by the Rector Magnificus, the Secretary of College of Deans, and your honorary promoters, and affixed with the Great Seal of the University.
The deans may sit down again. Dr. Honoris Causa Tima Bansal, on behalf of the College of Deans and of the Executive Board and the entire academic community present here today, I congratulate you very much on your honorary degree. Our university is very proud that you have been added to our gallery list of honorary doctors. And we will now listen to the commencement speech by Professor Berends.
Dear Honorary Doctor, dear Tima, we are very honored to have you as Honorary Doctor of the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Your work has received many accolades already, including Fellowship of the Royal Society of Canada, Fellowship of the Academy of Management, holding a Canada Research Chair, having an honorary doctorate already from the University of Montreal, and that's for good reasons. As a scholar, you just do not bring only new bits and pieces of insight, but you are bringing about a change of paradigms. Let me point it out in 3 points. First, you have established sustainability as a core topic in the field of business and management. Your doctoral research at the University of Oxford in the 1990s examined what stimulates organizations to take sustainability seriously. And your work, Why Companies Go Green, a model of ecological responsiveness, has been cited more than 5,000 times. And in total, your work has been cited over almost 30,000 times, not just in management, but also across disciplines. And you have shown that sustainability can become an integral part of organizational strategy, not just an external constraint. And thereby you've been inspiring others to contribute to a more sustainable future. Second, you have shaped a new way of seeing. A way of seeing in which time is central. And you've shown that time is both central in sustainability as well as in strategy. Sustainability means meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So in this spirit, you have offered groundbreaking insight in how organizations deal with time, how they make temporal trade-offs, how they orient at the future, or fall into traps, such as short-termism. And in various roles, such as Deputy Editor of the Academy of Management Journal, you have paved the way for qualitative research as the means to generate such new ways of seeing. Third, you are changing how we're doing research and teaching. Through your leadership at Innovation North, a network with practitioners, scholars, you've promoted the co-creation of knowledge with practitioners, rather than seeing knowledge production as a privileged domain of researchers at a university. And you have created an expanding network of researchers and practice partners who are reimagining business innovation to create better businesses, a more resilient and prosperous, sustainable society. And now, as chair of the board of the United Nations Principles of Responsible Management Education, you are shaping educational practices in the spirit of co-creation. And you have accomplished all of that with great energy and as being a source of inspiration for others. And your accomplishments, they resonate strongly with the values of our Vrije Universiteit, as well as with the mission of the School of Business and Economics to do research and science with purpose. Therefore, we are really proud to have you as honorary doctor. And congratulations also on behalf of my fellow promoter Mirella Kleine, the board of the School of Business and Economics, and our whole academic network. Congratulations.
We're going to do a little photo session. Okay. Yes. Our beetle is getting impatient. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Tima, would you like to say a few words?
I would, thank you. Thank you, Rector Magnificus, Professor Dr. Jörn Gertz, and ladies and gentlemen of VU University. I want to congratulate the university for its 143rd anniversary, as well as the School of Business and Economics for its 75th anniversary. It's a sincere honor to receive this honorary doctorate, and it's also an honor to celebrate the birthday celebrations. So I want to start with a story. This podium is indeed high. There we go. You can actually see me now. A story of a man in a hot air balloon flying high above the earth, and he looks down and he shouts to a woman below him. He says, "Excuse me, can you tell me where I am?" And the woman shouts back at him with the altitude, the latitude, and the longitude. And he says, "Well, thank you. That's very helpful." And he says, "You must be an academic." And she says, "Why, yes, of course. How did you know?" And he says, "Well, you've given me a lot of really precise information, but it's not very helpful." She shouts back. She says, "Well, you must be an executive." And he says, "Of course. How did you know?" And she says, "It's because you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and you need the people below you to solve your problems." I say that to illustrate the differences in knowledge between academics and practitioners or executives, and that's been a very significant part of my academic career. But the really important part of my career, the center of my career, has been around sustainable development and how organizations can move towards sustainable development. And I'm going to just give you two facts that you probably already know, but at the same time, it gives a sharp point to the points that I want to make. First, 10 of the last 13 years have been the hottest on record. Many of us know that. Last July was 0.24 degrees higher than any other July in history. That should give you pause. And here's another statistic that should give you pause. And this is very related to Toby's work as well. In terms of population of species, 69% of species have been lost since 1970. I was born before that. And so when you consider that we have lost 69% of species since I've been alive, since many of you have been alive, that is frightening. The way that business tackles these problems is in its very, very simplest form, and it's by just managing carbon. And what we do in business is often just try to reduce carbon, and we try to get to net zero. So executives are simply managing carbon, but companies cannot be net zero. There's no organization in the world that produces anything that can ever be net zero. The only way to get to net zero as a community, as a planet, is through collaboration, cooperation, and co-creation. We need the circular economy. This year's topic, thanks to the rector, was the power of networks. We need to leverage this power in order to tackle these environmental problems. It's the only way we can. If I leave you with only one thought in this speech, it is to advocate for a systems approach to business or a network approach to business and to research. We need to collaborate these systems problems. We need to collaborate with these systems problems. Those problems are imposed by the natural environment. When I started to see the problems, these environmental problems, the systems problems, not as just carbon problems, I started to see myself as part of the system, not apart from the system. And as I saw myself as part of the system, I saw myself as part of the solution of the system. So every time I speak to a class, every time I talk to an executive in my research, every time I give a speech, I am changing part of the system. And we all are part of a system as researchers. There are hidden networks everywhere. Those are those social relationships that we have. There's the financial relationships that we have. But there's also the identity that we hold. The identity that we hold as researchers, the identity that we hold with VU University. And when we take actions, those actions cascade through our network, much like Toby showed us with carbon. And we can be part of that change if we see ourselves as part of the system. I have long believed in networks. 20 years ago, I founded the Network for Business Sustainability, which now has 40,000 followers. Something to be proud of? Maybe. But at the same time, all we did was just communicate research for practice. It was only 5 years ago that I really started to embed this knowledge of partnership with executives, and that was when I formed Innovation North. And we are solving real problems. We're working with an insurance company to build resilient and sustainable homes. They can't do it on their own. They do it with us. We're building a new financial instrument with the bank, largest bank in Canada, so that we can start to deal with biodiversity loss in soil. My laboratory now is business. My lab partners are executives. No longer am I on the research or on the ground yelling at the executive above. We are now in the same hot air balloon. I want to say that collaboration is the only way that we can actually solve these environmental problems, not just for business, but for all of humanity. I want to sincerely thank you for this incredible honor. I'm sincerely proud to join your community and look forward to leveraging the power of networks. Thank you.
So inspiring. Thank you so much. We were having dinner yesterday evening, just to explain the intricacies of this ceremony and where you have to stand, and also a little bit about philosophy and some of the things that Tima just mentioned really struck my interest as well as a researcher or as a former researcher. So Tima, you're part of our network now, so I hope you'll be here as much as you can be, and our doors to philosophy, to business, to whatever subject that interests you are wide open. Welcome. All right, so for the last part of the program, Fleur Deken, one of our university research professors, was going to moderate a panel session, but she's unfortunately ill. So we've asked Hans to step in, and he is willing to do so. Thank you very much, Hans. To talk a little bit about that question that I just asked the audience and you. Is the network, like Tima or Toby showed us, is a network, is that a way of looking at our academic community? But I also want to invite the other panelists who can now come onto the stage. Yes, there you are. And Hans is going to introduce them. So I just wanted to make sure that they're not left in a corner there. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Jeroen. So Jeroen proposed to use the network as metaphor for our academic work, and we are going to explore that with this panel that I will introduce, and with two videos of teams, researchers from the Vrije Universiteit, through which we can explore what is the power of their network and what is at stake in this network approach. But first, I would like to introduce the panel to you. We know Tima by now. Welcome to the panel. Then Katrina Dutil-Novais, who is Professor of Philosophy at the Faculty of Humanities. Welcome. Christian Kok, Assistant Professor of Politics and Governance of Sustainability Transitions at the Faculty of Science. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then Saskia Duis, Associate Professor at the Department of Ethics, Law and Humanities at Amsterdam UMC. Welcome. But first, let us get started by having a look at these two videos that shed light on the power of networks in education and research. Please.
My basic approach is just curiosity. I'm very curious to know what our students are doing after graduation. As I know my students from education, from lecture, from master thesis supervision, I would like to know what they are doing and how they are doing. And so therefore I connect with them and I like to expand my network and follow what they're doing. So therefore, I connect to them, I invite them and ask them how they would like to participate in not only research, but also in educational projects. So based on my philosophy with regard to this collaboration, to work together much more with external partners, stakeholders, former students, is to break down the walls and go and see what's happening out there, outside the university.
So at one point I received an email from the VU and they asked me whether or not I wanted to follow a course, and then I replied and I said no, I don't want to follow a course, I want to give one. I want to give a course about collaboration. And during that process I got in contact with Yvette. In this workshop we invite students from the VU and we help them, we facilitate them, we teach them how to collaborate. How can I put different perspectives on top of each other and create something new and create something meaningful? So the thing is that at the university they teach you a lot of academic skills, but next to those academic skills I think it's really important to teach students as well how to collaborate, the skills you need in order to be successful within companies. And I do think working together with companies really brings that to the university.
I think it's extremely important for students to connect with people from outside academia, because in the end that's the world they're going to work in. There's just a minority of students that actually remain in academia.
Nellis Autism Register is an online cohort of autistic people, parents of autistic children and legal representatives of people who cannot self-report. And we follow these people every year with online questions about their life, online tests, but also, for instance, genetic research. And our aim is simple. We want to understand autism and we want to support autistic people. We used to do research about autistic people. And we prefer to do research with autistic people and also to include autistic people in our team.
Autism, I have some experience with that. I'm now 70 years old and I was 58 when I got the official certificates that I'm autistic. There is a saying within the autism world that says, nothing about us without us. We're not really any different from other people. What I do is I go out, make contact with those organizations and help them to improve their understanding of autism, and in return we usually get their questions that we can use in our next research year.
Autism readiness is still a blind spot for a lot of municipalities in the Netherlands. And Veldhoven won this year's edition of the Autism Readiness Prize because they do not have this blind spot and because they are enabling organizations to support people with autism who are struggling to live by themselves to actually live by themselves. And this whole fact emphasizes the importance of this prize.
Of course, there can be tension in working this way because people feel that you are jeopardizing your objectivity as a researcher. When I started doing my research, it was much more that I published my data in an international journal and there was little communication about the reasons why we did the research and about the results. For me, the power of networks as a researcher is that it allows you to step outside of your ivory tower, not just to teach people about your research, but also to learn from them. I think it makes for more valuable research and also it is a lot more fun.
Catharina, based upon your research on the shape of networks and now seeing these two clips, how would you characterize these networks?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to say I relate to this particularly to the last video because I'm the parent of an autistic child, so I stand here not just as a philosopher, but also as somebody who has a particular knowledge, right? So another thing that philosophers like to talk about is the idea of knowledge by experience, experiential knowledge. So I think the very important thing that is happening in this general trend of including, a much broader range of partners in research is precisely that it integrates many different kinds of knowledge. So not just the scientific knowledge, the academic knowledge that we produce here at the university, but also the knowledge of the people who are autistic themselves, right, to stay in this particular case, families of autistic people. So it really is extremely important, not just in ethical terms, but also in purely epistemic terms, in scientific terms. It's different kinds of knowledge, and they're all equally valuable. So that's why it is very, very important, as in this initiative, but also more generally, to really broaden our horizons in terms of the partners that we include in our work as academics.
So what do you see then as the benefits of these larger scale networks?
Yes, just simply different kinds of knowledge. So simply more knowledge, more different kinds of knowledge, and therefore more knowledge, because every kind of knowledge only gives a perspective. It's one-sided. And if you bring in different perspectives, of course, the phenomena you're studying will be analyzed from many other different angles. And so purely epistemically, that's much better. But also in ethical, moral terms, right, as was said in the video, nothing about us without us. So I think there's also this ethical, almost democratic component that I think is also very important. So in that sense, it's really this idea of networks with high connectivity and including regions of society, right, in terms of networks that until now had poor connections with academia. And it's really, our job also to reach out and to make these connections interactive in the sense that it's mutually beneficial, both for us to learn from people outside of academia, for them to learn from us. So that would be the ideal scenario, which is, I think, very much what you were mentioning, right, in your speech. So,
thank you, Chris. So you're an authority on the politics and governance of sustainability transitions, and therefore you have a unique view on the role of stakeholders involving diverse groups like farmers, like patients, also in decision-making processes. So from your perspective, how do you perceive these examples that we've just seen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I thought they were really inspiring and two great examples of exactly the power of networks. And I also fully support what Catharina says. And to me, that saying nothing about us without us, it also really struck me, because I think it's one of the core reasons for engaging in these types of networks. We are not in the ivory tower, right? We develop knowledge, we develop innovations, and they affect people, they affect communities. So it only makes sense to involve those communities, involve those stakeholders, in thinking about, but what kinds of research questions should we answer? What are the problems that we need to do research on that need new innovations? So from that perspective, I really saw these as powerful tools, these networks, also to create change. So my field is, it's listed nicely as well, sustainability transition. So we try to understand how these transdisciplinary networks involving researchers, policymakers, maybe farmers when it is about food systems, how they can try and accelerate change, sustainable transformation. And I think related to the systems perspective, that is so important, because including these perspectives, building visions of a future together, creating the knowledge of the system together, it really helps to create legitimate innovations.
And what can the university do to support the development of such networks?
Many things, I think. But maybe it's also good to point out, because it does have a lot of value, these types of networks, but I think it's also important to stress that it is not easy to build them or to create them or to support them. Especially when you think about changes in society. I mean, we want to include all these different knowledges, all these perspectives, but we also want to, at some point, go somewhere together. And if that works, then it's a very powerful tool. So what the university could do, well, we could develop competences in our students, as was shown in the video on education, with real-world experience and real-world education. But also, I think, and maybe we can discuss later on also, there's, I think, a large role for academics, and maybe different roles, new roles that we have to adopt while we do research, and not just the academic in the ivory tower.
So you're already hinting at that it might be difficult, so there might also be costs involved. So then turning to you, Saskia, you also interacted quite heavily with stakeholders in your research on inequality in healthcare, also during your PhD. I can imagine that's quite an additional effort that you have to engage in, that it takes time, and how did you experience that? And how did you deal with those investments, the costs that were needed?
Yeah, I think it's already really interesting how we talk about this, because I don't see it as a burden or as an additional thing. I think this is my work. This is my work. Because I want to be a researcher, I want to understand what's going on, I want to understand health inequities. In my case, I want to understand the health of low-paid care workers. And I cannot do my job if I don't work together with the people whose life and work is subject to the study. So I think it's not an additional thing. This is my core job. And in addition to it, I think it's also not a burden, because this was the most fun part. You know, I go to work the most happily on days where I can do this type of work, where I can work together, learn together with artists, with long-term care workers. That's like the most productive days, I would say, of my work.
Great. Katrina.
Yes, no, I just wanted to add from a philosophical, epistemological perspective. On the one hand, there's a lot of work showing the value of diversity for knowledge production, but on the other hand, there's also work on interdisciplinarity studies, for example, that shows that it's not easy, because, you know, in a way, different regions of networks, they also almost like as if they spoke different languages. So there's a sense in which there's a little bit this work of diversity. On the one hand, it's a richness, but it also brings along these challenges of understanding, right? The more somebody has an experience that's different from your own, the more difficult it can be to communicate with them. So, it's not so much of course, there's the cost of time, but there's also the kind of like, let's almost call it hermeneutical cost of how do you understand each other well. And that, while it's in no way a reason not to engage with different regions of the network, I think it is important to be aware of the risks involved, one of them being that you end up talking past each other, perhaps because you don't have enough shared vocabulary. So one of the things you have to be sure is in place is sufficient common ground so that you can understand each other instead of creating misunderstandings. So just in this respect, it's a potential risk that I would like to emphasize, while of course being very much in favor of doing this.
And how did you approach that, Saskia? So creating this common ground, avoiding that you're talking past each other. How did you do so?
I think, so I work together with care workers, with a photographer, and I think it's really about learning. That's just a skill we need to do, and I sometimes even think it's not really hard. My mother was a care worker. She worked in long-term care when I was younger, and we could communicate very well with each other until I went to university, learned to talk in a very abstract language, learn to talk in different ways, learn to act in different ways. And somehow, I sometimes think we educate our students to forget to be able to talk with the people that are important to them. So sometimes it's also about unlearning certain types of academic distance or academic jargon. And this is the work, we just there were misunderstandings the entire time, but you just, like, the effort is, just as in any research process, you think you understand the phenomenon and then you don't, and you think it and no, you were on the wrong track. So this is our work, you know, trying to understand the phenomenon, time, you know, trial and error, and that's, I think, exactly the same. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's not that hard. We have to unlearn something maybe to be able to do so.
Chris.
Yeah, if I may add, because I think this is really important. And what I also see and experience is the importance of building trust. So we see that there's lots of research being done now, multi-stakeholder projects, including everyone. All the funding calls request us to do some sort of an exercise like that. But it is not something you can just do, like you tick the box, oh, we have included these knowledges, and then suddenly everyone is happy and there are nice results. It is building, as Saskia said, these relationships of trust, understanding each other, and also a bit of a paradox perhaps, because it also means a change in roles. If you come there as the researcher, what does it do to a community, right? So we have to maybe step back as researchers as well, give a bit more power to other voices.
Listen, we have to listen.
Yeah.
We have to listen, but I would also like to add, because I think what was really interesting from the talk of Toby is that we sometimes think, we look at like this, the world above the ground, in which we make knowledge, and we like extract all this knowledge from the society, but it's not, if we only think of what the benefits are for us as researchers, or how we benefit from these types, something goes wrong, because then we become a parasite as an academic community. And I think what I really think is inspiring is we need to it needs to be a symbiosis. We need to give something back, because otherwise, you know, as a researcher, you come there to exploit. So I think it's just our core task as researchers to give back to the communities we're researching. Yeah.
Thanks. Tima, you also have lots of experience working with stakeholders, working with company executives, and I wonder how you deal with possible value conflicts that you may have, that there may be different values at stake, economic prosperity on the one hand, sustainability objectives on the other hand. How do you deal with such value conflicts, and can you share some of the lessons that you've learned along the way?
So answering this question actually is relevant to a lot of the other dialogue that's come before me. So if I could just build on what we've already heard. This notion of, as Katerina has said, about epistemic knowledge, but there's this notion of epistemic authority, I think, that becomes really important, that we need to recognize that every person in this room, in a room, has knowledge that's important, that can give insight. And when you step back from your own authority, and everybody steps back from their own authority and recognizes that they have something to offer, you do see different parts of the problem. And so the value conflicts start to fall away, because then you're all in learning mode. So I think that this notion of equal knowledge, or everybody's knowledge is valued, is really important. But then this notion of how do you build trust? How do you actually really build trust beyond just listening? I think it's hard, because there's often a position of mistrust or distrust, and that's the conflicts that you talk about. And one, I think, very specific way that plays into this, and I think that we were talking about this beforehand, but this notion of boundary objects, that you have a problem that you're trying to solve, and that problem becomes the object that allows you to lean in, allows everybody to lean in to understand. And so it's not about you and me, or him and her, but it's about us trying to solve that problem. The boundary objects can be various forms. It can be artwork or photography. It could be a visual thing. And you know, kids, if they build sandcastles, they lean in, even though they can fight in the playground. But building a sandcastle together makes a huge difference. And we give you, someone once told me, it was a man, he says, well, if men want to meet girls in the park, men want to meet women in the park, what they do is they get a dog. And you know, a man going up to a woman in the park, she's going to run away. But if you have a dog, the dog becomes a boundary object that allows for conversations. And I think what we need are more boundary objects to allow us to have conversations. And in my work, what we do is we build visuals together, sort of like photography. And if you get managers and researchers in a room saying, how do we solve this problem? Let's try to draw it together. It's amazing how much people lean in. Because when we don't need language, we're using a language that none of us really know. And so I think that understanding boundary objects has been really effective in allowing this cross-dialogue for myself.
Thanks, Tima. And unfortunately, time at this moment is over, but we will have drinks where we can have the conversation. You can continue the conversation on networks. But thanks a lot, Tima, Katrina, Chris, Saskia, for your contributions to the panel. Now it's time for Jeroen again.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, panel. You can stay seated as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
You can also go back to the audience, whatever you prefer. Indeed, let's take this moment as a starting point to continue our conversation about these networks as a model for our university. I have a couple of thoughts as well. I may share them a little bit later, but not before I introduce our pre-last speaker, and that is Nina Polak, our new writer in residence, onze Vrije Schrijver, so to say. Nina will participate in various activities at VU Amsterdam throughout the year. The coming year she will join several research groups to see what they do, and she is particularly concerned with student well-being. A topic that she's been advocating for and writing about a lot, especially also for the paper The Correspondent. Nina, we are thrilled to have you. Again, I can't see you. Ah, there you are. So please join us on stage, and the floor is entirely yours.
Dank u wel. Goedemiddag. Hi. So, when I was 15 years old, about 15 years old, I cherished this DVD of the cult movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? You might remember it. It was a new agey thing, full of psychedelic ideas about the power of thought and the endless possibilities of the universe. The film claimed to say something profound about the nature of consciousness and about quantum mechanics. Perfect mysteries all in all for a pot-smoking teenager lying on the couch, waiting for her life to begin. What I took from it at the time was the questionable notions that our minds are the only limitations to our true potential. What I, of course, did not take from it was any understanding of quantum mechanics, a branch of physics that most mortals will never understand, and that perhaps precisely for that reason is so suitable for messing around with. You could call this subgenre of popular imagination pop quantum. From self-help books to games and action movies, like this one, you might remember it, and this one. With the language of quantum mechanics, you can give a semblance of scientificness to just about everything. Today, however, we are not talking about quantum physics, but about a field of science that equally stimulates the imagination. The mycelium that Toby Kiers researches is, I would argue, rapidly becoming a common symbol for the global interdependence that so needs our recognition. Ecologically, socially, economically, we've been talking about it quite a bit today. So to put it plainly, fungi and mushrooms are hot stuff. Call it the rise of pop mycology. We see this quite literally in the popularity of documentaries like Fantastic Fungi, the fact that urban youth are gifting each other mushroom cultivation kits. I got one just like this on my birthday recently. And let's just call it out, in the renaissance of psychedelics that makes it increasingly acceptable to prefer psilocybin over psychotherapy. On a more metaphorical level, the mushroom kingdom provides a rich visual language that opens our eyes to invisible aspects of reality. If you pay attention, you'll find, of course, in the center of Amsterdam, an abundance of cliched fluorescent imagery like this. We could refer to it as mushroom art, and it usually pops up in places where hallucinogens are sold. This mushroom art has its roots, of course, in the psychedelic art of the 60s and the 70s, but it's an aesthetic that never completely disappeared, and it has undergone, I think, a revival in recent years. We see it in various games, in movies and series, on social media. Its connotations are usually futuristic, ecological, eco-futuristic, and mostly positive, techno-optimistic, like so. Sometimes we are also presented with horrific mushrooms, like the parasitic fungus in the recent series The Last of Us, which colonizes the brain and turns half the population into zombies. But one of the most important metaphors that these images carry, of course, is that of the invisible network that so stimulates our utopian imagination, and in the best case, points the way to new paradigms of interconnectedness in science and in thinking more generally. This is not my water, but I'll take it anyway. We're all one. So the mycelium, as this magically glowing blue tissue, gained broader attention a few years ago with the concept of the wood wide web, the idea that trees communicate and take care of each other through extensive fungal networks. This, I think, shows us how eager we are as culture-making humans to mix metaphors, in this case an ecological metaphor, with a technological one. We, as mycological nitwits, now say things to each other like, you know, nature has its own internet. Exactly this metaphorical mixture is the material for probably the most well-known exponent of this visual language, James Cameron's Avatar, a film which, oddly enough, upon its release, appeared to me both completely cliched and totally new at the same time. In Avatar, everything I just mentioned culminates. It splashes off the screen. The psychedelic, holistic, deep ecology, network theory, the utopian marriage of biology and technology. And central to all of this is a tree. This tree of souls, connecting the blue-skinned inhabitants of the planet Pandora to what they call Ewa, an ecosystem, allegedly, with more connections than the human brain, a nature consciousness, if you will, a deity. But if you look at it in simplest terms, it is once again a glowing blue tissue of threads, or as our minds could now interpret it, a fungal network, mycelium. So what I'm telling you here undoubtedly sounds totally vulgar to scientists. It must be strange to see your efforts translated so crudely. But at the same time, I think it could be considered quite a compliment that what you're studying is so vividly presented in the language with which humanity imagines the future. A better future, mind you, because if popular culture conveys anything about mushrooms, I guess, and fungi, it is that we have a great lot to learn from them. That the future, as Toby showed us, is fungal. Thank you.
Nina, the future is fungal. I've never said that to anyone, but I will now. Somebody from the organizing team just informed me that the panel might feel a little, uncomfortable sitting on stage. So you can go back to your seat. I'm sorry. I'm a very bad host. All right. So as we wrap up this Dies Natalis celebration, let's take a moment to reflect on the stories we've heard and the examples that we've witnessed and the connections that we've made today. At the outset, I expressed my hope that you when you leave this room, would carry a newfound understanding and inspiration about the ways in which networks can unite us, benefit us, and shape new necessary dynamics within our university. Of course, we weren't talking about the verb networking. Today was not about the kind of networking where you exchange business cards and pleasantries. Don't worry, there will be drinks outside and we will be doing that as well. No, today was about something deeper. It was about a way of organizing ourselves. As Toby Kiers and our other guests have shown so beautifully, today was about the power of networks. Networks are structures that connect us and change in unison with the outside world. And networks have extraordinary, often emergent properties and hold opportunity for every single one of us. Thinking in terms of networks challenges us to think differently about hierarchy, for example. It puts more emphasis on the fact that we can and that we must play different roles and collaborate in a more natural and sustainable fashion. It is about how we can organize ourselves to be more dynamic and more responsive to life's challenges. We've taken Toby's fungal networks from underground above ground, so to say. And we've discussed whether they are a good model for us to understand how our own academic community works. Today is a call for us to realize that when working together as a network, we're way stronger than any one of us alone. It is a well-known notion that the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. And yes, this demands something of us. So we ask ourselves, is it worth it? Can we even pull it off? Can we also decide not to trust the network and focus on ourselves instead? Sure, we can choose different paths, but let's not forget the world around us is already changing. New opportunities and new challenges present themselves every day. We already live in a network society, and the central position of science and education in society is now more important and more crucial than ever. If we wish to have an impact on this world, we'd better be attuned to it. As a campus university with an idealist foundation, a strong community, and a set of broadly felt societal values, we are in a great position to be pioneers of network thinking. Being responsive and flexible in the face of an ever-changing environment is not just desirable, it's essential. So let us, VU Amsterdam, be the ones to take the lead in embracing a mindset of connection and communion. We've already laid a perfect foundation for building a dynamic network out of our academic community. Last year, when I spoke to you from this place, I promised that we would develop different career paths for research, education, and impact, so that everybody can contribute on the basis of who they are as an academic, as a human being. And now, a year later, all 9 faculties are implementing these career paths, and so we have the basic building blocks to form diverse teams all through our university. Teams that can combine different roles and that are dynamic and responsive in the sense that they change flexibly with a changing world. And this way, we can maximally contribute to the solution of problems out there. And we need little further clarification, I think, on the severity and acuteness of some of those problems that are out there in our world today. Dear friends, on a more personal note perhaps, I am terrified by what is happening in the world around us at this moment. We see strife and anger and unrests and anxiety on a daily basis now, and even here on our trusted university campus, which has been a home to so many, a safe place, it's getting more and more unsafe. Frankly, I do fear for a future where I or my colleagues on the board, our deans, our directors, will not be enough when it comes to holding our community together. Now, more than ever, we need to hold on to each other and embrace this community. This is your network in all its diverse splendor. Even when we do not agree, we are academics. We argue, we investigate on the joint platform that our university represents. The connection needs to come from within. I ask this community, this network, to hold on, even though now, more than ever, it requires all our effort to do so. In line with the recent UNESCO statement, I want to say that peace begins with seeing each other as human beings. My call on you today is to not let go of each other, of the networks that you're part of, and of the greater cause we all strive for, which is a better world. And I give you my personal commitment to hold on to that same hope in return. Thank you. I close this extraordinary session of the Council of Deans. May our search for truth and wisdom be of service to the flourishing of the world and humankind. Please stand up, but stay put as the academic procession will leave the aula first.